I sat quietly at the back of the lecture hall, my pen tapping against the desk, a little nervous habit I just couldn't seem to shake. Professor 𝐤𝐤 stood at the front, his voice filling the dimly lit room, his passion for the importance of ethics in academia evident in every word. The soft glow from the projector cast him in a gentle light, accentuating the calm charisma that seemed to draw everyone in. I could feel a mix of admiration and anxiety bubbling up in my chest as he spoke, his gaze moving steadily across the room. "Ethics are the backbone of our academic integrity," he declared, pausing for effect. "Without it, we lose not only our credibility but our purpose as scholars." His eyes briefly rested on me, and a slight warmth flushed my cheeks. "Remember," he continued, "your grades aren't just numbers, they reflect your commitment to honesty and hard work." I glanced down at my notebook, mostly filled with half-hearted notes and absent-minded doodles. This semester had been relentless, and my grades showed it, slipping further than I ever thought possible. I'd always seen myself as a diligent student, but the pressure was taking a toll. The thought of disappointing my family, who had sacrificed so much for my education, gnawed at me, a constant, unshakable worry. As the lecture wrapped up, I felt a surge of urgency to talk to Professor 𝐤𝐤. Gathering my things, I walked to the front, my heart pounding. "Professor 𝐤𝐤," I called out, trying to sound more confident than I felt. He turned, giving me a warm smile that sent a flutter through my stomach. "Marianne, right? What can I do for you?" I wanted to discuss my recent paper," I managed, clutching my folder. "I've been struggling, and I was hoping for some guidance, maybe even extra credit?" His eyes lit up with interest. "Of course, I'd be happy to help. Your paper had strong points, but there's definitely room to grow. Let's take a look together." He gestured toward his office, and I felt a strange mixture of excitement and nerves as I followed him down the hall. "Marianne," he said, glancing over as we walked, "I admire your willingness to seek help. That shows dedication, and I value that in my students." "Thanks. I just don't want to fall behind," I replied softly. But as we drew closer to his office, I sensed an undercurrent of tension that made it harder to ignore the whirlwind of emotions stirring within me. Later that night, I lay sprawled across my bed, replaying the conversation in my mind. Reaching for my phone, I found myself texting my best friend Joanna. I needed to unload, to let out this mess of thoughts. "Hey, can we talk?" I typed, fingers trembling slightly. Almost instantly, my phone buzzed with her reply. "Of course, what's up?" Taking a deep breath, I texted back. "I'm struggling in class. I talked to Professor 𝐤𝐤 today and I think I might be starting to like him." There was a pause before she responded, and I could practically feel her surprise through the screen. "Marianne, you can't be serious. That's crossing a line, don't you think?" "I know, but he just seems so understanding, and he really seemed to care about my struggles," I replied, trying to sort through my own conflicted feelings. "Just be careful, okay? You don't want to risk everything over something that could end badly," she warned. "Yeah, I know. It's just hard not to feel drawn to him," I admitted, torn between the thrill of it and the weight of what it could mean. As I lay in bed, staring into the darkness, the mix of dread and excitement swirling within me felt suffocating. I was caught between my determination to succeed and the complicated emotions this new connection brought. What started as a simple academic concern was turning into a web of feelings I wasn't sure I could untangle. I closed my eyes, hoping for clarity, but all I found was a storm of uncertainty. The next time I lingered after class, the air felt heavy with unspoken words. Gathering my notes, I braced myself to talk with Professor 𝐤𝐤 again, feeling his presence behind me, and my heart raced with the sense of what might lie ahead. The weight of what-if questions pressed on my mind. What if he dismissed my concerns outright? Or worse, what if he could see the hint of desperation in my eyes? Just then his voice broke through my thoughts. "Marianne," he called softly, his tone gentle. I turned, and his warm smile sent a shiver down my spine. "I'm glad you stayed. I've been meaning to discuss your recent paper with you." "Really?" I managed to say, my voice barely above a whisper. He took a step closer, and I could catch a hint of his cologne, rich and subtle. "Yes, I think we need to dive deeper into your approach. How about a study session? Just the two of us?" His suggestion hung in the air, both tempting and unnerving. I hesitated, feeling my pulse quicken at the implications. That sounds great, Professor. I could really use the help. Good, he replied, his eyes flashing with a hint of mischief. Let's meet in my office later this evening. As I walked back to my dorm, my thoughts wavered between excitement and unease. The idea of a private session was thrilling, but I knew I was stepping into dangerous territory. Yet the thought of improving my grades felt like an opportunity one couldn't resist. Later that evening, I found myself standing outside his office, heart pounding. I took a deep breath and knocked. "Come in," he called, his voice smooth and inviting. As I stepped in, I was struck by the cozy warmth of his office. Shelves lined with books, the soft lighting casting a calm glow. "Mary Ann," he greeted, motioning for me to sit. "I'm glad you made it." "Thank you for meeting with me," I replied, hoping my voice sounded steady while my heart raced. When the door clicked shut behind me, it heightened the intimacy of the moment. We began going over my paper, but soon the conversation drifted from academics to more personal matters. I opened up about my dreams of becoming a writer, my quiet fears of failing, aspirations I rarely shared. Connell listened, his eyes focused on me, and I felt a deep sense of connection. "I understand the pressure you're under," he said in a low, sincere voice. "I've faced similar challenges throughout my career. Sometimes it feels like climbing a mountain with no summit in sight." "Exactly," I sighed. "It's overwhelming. I just want to prove I belong here, that I'm capable." "You are capable, Mary Ann," he said, his gaze steady. "But sometimes we need a little help to see it in ourselves." His words sparked a sense of hope within me. But as the night wore on, an undercurrent of tension filled the room, charged and hard to ignore. I caught his eyes lingering on me with a look I hadn't seen before, a pull that seemed to draw us closer. "Can I confess something?" he asked, breaking the silence. "Of course," I replied, my curiosity piqued. "I admire your determination, but I feel like there's more to you than grades and papers." "You have a spark," he said, leaning in just slightly. I swallowed, my pulse quickening. "Thank you. That means a lot coming from you." In that moment, something shifted. He reached out, tucking a strand of my hair behind my ear, and my breath caught. Our eyes locked, and before I knew it, I found myself leaning closer. Everything beyond that room faded as his lips met mine, soft and electric. A rush of exhilaration filled me, stirring feelings I buried beneath academic stress and expectations. As the kiss deepened, I felt a confusing mix of thrill and fear. I had crossed a line I never thought I would, blurring the lines between student and professor, between respect and risk. I pulled back, breathless, my thoughts spiraling. "What have we done?" I whispered, heart pounding. Connell looked at me, a mix of longing and concern in his eyes. "I don't know. But it felt right, didn't it?" "It did," I admitted, both exhilarated and frightened. "But what does this mean for us?" "For my grades. Let's take it one step at a time," he replied, his voice calm and reassuring. "We'll figure this out together." I nodded, knowing I'd ventured into an unknown and uncertain space. As I left his office that night, my mind swirled with the possibilities and risks of what lay ahead. The thrill of our hidden connection lingered, but lurking beneath it was a weight, a shadowy dread that refused to leave. I had crossed a line, and there was no going back now. As I walked across campus, the weight of my connection with Professor Connell pressed on me, heavy and unrelenting. My grades had soared since that night in his office, each high mark both gratifying and guilt-inducing. I was caught in a loop of secrecy and exhilaration, the thrill of our moments together intoxicating. Yet my focus in classes waned as my thoughts drifted repeatedly to him. "Mary Ann, are you okay?" Joanna's voice pulled me from my thoughts as we sat in the bustling cafeteria, surrounded by students blissfully unaware of my turmoil. "Yeah, just a bit tired," I replied, forcing a smile, but the way she studied me made it hard to keep up the act. "I don't know, Em. You've been different lately. More confident, but also a bit distant." She leaned in, her expression turning serious. "There are rumors going around. About you and Professor Connell." My stomach dropped. "What kind of rumors?" I tried to sound casual, but my voice betrayed me. She hesitated, her eyes scanning my face. "Just whispers, you know how people are. They're saying you're getting special treatment because of, well, you know." "Come on, Joanna, that's ridiculous." I shot back, my heart pounding. He just cares about his students. I'm doing better in class, that's all. She shook her head. Marianne, you're smart. You don't need to play games to get good grades. I just don't want to see you get hurt, okay? Her concern was genuine, and tension rose in my chest. I'm fine, really, I replied, maybe too sharply. I could barely stand how defensive I sounded, but I couldn't let her see my inner struggle. I appreciate your concern, but I've got this under control. As the days passed, an odd sense of empowerment grew within me, mingling with the guilt. My class participation was better than ever, and 𝐤𝐤 noticed, often catching my eye during lectures with a small, approving smile whenever I answered correctly. His acknowledgement felt electric, making me feel visible in a way that was both exhilarating and confusing. Marianne, you're really coming into your own this semester, 𝐤𝐤 said one afternoon as students filtered out of the lecture hall, his voice smooth and warm. I can tell you've been putting in the effort. Thanks, Professor, I replied, a blush creeping up my cheeks. I felt a surge of pride in his acknowledgement. Why don't we continue our study sessions? I think we could explore some advanced topics together, he suggested, leaning a little closer. The way he looked at me sent my heart racing. Sure, I'd like that, I said, trying to sound casual, though inside I was caught up in a swirl of emotions. That evening, back in my dorm room, the walls seemed to close in around me as I tried to study. The words on the page blurred, my focus shattered. Then my phone buzzed with a message from 𝐤𝐤. Can we meet later? I want to discuss your progress in person. A shiver of excitement ran through me, but it was quickly replaced by a pang of guilt. Was this really about my studies, or was there something more? Sure, I'll be there, I typed back, my fingers trembling. When I arrived at his office, the air felt charged with a tension that was almost palpable. 𝐤𝐤 looked up from his desk as I entered, a warm smile spreading across his face. Right on time. I've been looking forward to this. We began reviewing my recent assignments, but the connection between us only seemed to grow stronger with every passing minute. He praised my efforts, and a sense of pride swelled within me. You've got a real talent for this, Marianne. I'm impressed, he said, his gaze intense. Thank you, I murmured, feeling the heat rise in my cheeks, wondering how long we could keep this line blurred. I couldn't have done it without your help. A whisper escaped me, thick with uncertainty. Watching him lean in, our distance shrinking until it felt almost non-existent. But remember, he replied softly, it's all you. You've earned every bit of this. His words were both reassuring and confusing, wrapping around me like a comforting yet complicated spell. I was riding high on the thrill of our secret connection, but a shadow of guilt clung to me, lurking in the back of my mind. I knew I was walking a tightrope, one wrong step and everything could come crashing down. Yet, as I looked into his eyes, a mixture of admiration, fear, and longing pulled me back in, making the risk seem worth it. The afternoon sun poured through 𝐤𝐤's office window, casting long shadows across walls lined with overflowing bookshelves. I sat across from him, my heart pounding as he carefully graded papers. The room felt charged, the silence between us thick with unspoken questions. You're really improving, Marianne, he said, glancing up with a warm smile that sent a thrill through me. I'm impressed. Thanks, Professor, I replied, my voice barely steady. I owe a lot of it to our study sessions. I tried to keep my tone light, but the weight of what those sessions meant hung heavily in the air. He leaned back in his chair, his gaze kind yet piercing. You have so much potential. I felt a blush creep over my cheeks, his compliment stirring something in me that was equal parts pride and uncertainty. As I looked at him, doubt started to spiral through my thoughts. Was this truly about my academic growth? Or was I simply another conquest? 𝐤𝐤, I began, my voice hesitant, my heart racing. Do you ever think about the ethics of us? His expression shifted, a flicker of something unreadable passing across his face. What do you mean? He asked, his tone casual, though his eyes narrowed slightly. I mean, you're my professor and I'm your student. Isn't there a line we might be crossing? My pulse quickened as I waited for his response. He leaned forward, resting his elbows on the desk, his voice low and soothing. Marianne, I won't deny that our relationship is unconventional, but I believe what we have is different. It's not just about grades, it's about connection. A warm flush filled me, but reality quickly dampened it. But what if people find out? I whispered, my voice trembling. What if this ruins everything for both of us? He reached across the desk, his fingers grazing mine, sending a spark through me. We won't let that happen. Just trust me, he said, his intense gaze holding mine until I felt my breath hitch. As we continued talking, 𝐤𝐤 revealed glimpses of his past, letting me see a more vulnerable side. I had a relationship once that ended badly, he confessed, a trace of sadness in his voice. It taught me a lot, but it also made me cautious. Cautious? I echoed, curious. He sighed, running a hand through his hair. I was young, and I let my emotions cloud my judgment. I don't want to make the same mistakes again. An urge to reach out to him filled me, to bridge the distance between us. But a voice in the back of my mind warned me, reminding me of the tangled web we were spinning. I understand, I said gently, but it still feels risky, doesn't it? A shadow of nostalgia crossed his face as he smiled. Life is full of risks, Marianne. Sometimes you have to take a leap of faith. His words echoed in my mind, stirring a part of me that longed for adventure. But even as I felt drawn in, another part of me nagged, reminding me how fragile our balance was. We shared a lingering look, and for that brief moment, the world outside seemed to melt away. As I walked across campus later, the weight of our conversation hung on me. My chest tightened as I caught snippets of whispered gossip floating through the air. Have you heard about Professor 𝐤𝐤? One voice said. Apparently, he's been getting a little too close to certain students. A chill ran through me and I quickened my pace, panic rising. What if they were talking about me? The feeling of paranoia settled heavily over me, each murmur and sideways glance adding to the dread building in my chest. The whispers seemed to follow me everywhere. Did you see who he was with last week? One student murmured. I can't believe he's allowed to get away with that, another added. Each word landed like a blow, making my heart sink further. I knew I needed to talk to 𝐤𝐤. This couldn't keep going on like this. The secrecy, the thrill, all of it felt like a ticking time bomb ready to explode and ruin us both. Back in my dorm, I sat on the edge of my bed, the soft glow from my laptop illuminating my face as I reread the email that had just come in. The subject line alone was enough to make my stomach twist. Regarding your conduct. Each word felt heavy, the meaning unraveling like a storm. An anonymous complaint. I was so sure we'd been careful, that our connection would stay between us, unspoken and untraceable. But now the walls were closing in. Frantically, I reached for my phone, dialing 𝐤𝐤's number. My hand shook as the line connected. Marianne. His voice was familiar, comforting, but tonight it sent a chill through me. 𝐤𝐤, we need to talk. Now. Is everything okay? He asked, a note of concern creeping into his voice. No, it's not, I managed, my voice barely steady. I just got an email from the administration. An anonymous complaint. They're investigating us. There was a silence and my heart dropped. After a moment he spoke. Meet me in my office in 10 minutes. When I arrived, he was already there, pacing, his face lined with worry. The atmosphere was thick with tension and my chest felt tight. Marianne, he said, stopping to look at me, his voice soft but strained. I didn't think it would come to this. I thought we were careful. Careful? 𝐤𝐤, you don't get it. This isn't just about us anymore. My future is on the line. Panic clawed at my chest, making it hard to breathe. I know, he replied, his tone gentler. But I care about you, Marianne. This connection between us, it's real. I never meant for it to put you in this position. Special. I repeated bitterly. Is that what you call this? Because right now it feels like I'm being set up to lose everything. 𝐤𝐤 stepped closer, his eyes searching mine. I don't want to lose you, Marianne. We can figure this out. We'll keep it quiet a little while longer. I promise. A flicker of hope struggled to break through the anxiety, but fear still gripped me. What if someone else finds out? What if they believe this complaint? We'll be careful, he whispered, his voice steady. You have to trust me. I won't let anything happen to you. I wanted to believe him, to sink into the comfort of his reassurance. But the weight of our choices loomed large like a dark cloud. 𝐤𝐤, I don't know if I can keep this up. It's too much. He reached out, gently holding my hands, his grip both comforting and firm. We're in this together, Marianne. Just give me a chance to prove it. I'll protect you. I promise. I stood there looking into his eyes, feeling the storm of my emotions churning as thunder rumbled outside, a fitting echo to my internal conflict. Suddenly the door flew open, and I yanked my hands away, heart racing. It was Joanna, her face pale and stricken as she took in the scene. "What's going on?" she demanded, her eyes moving between us. "Nothing," I started, but she cut me off. "Don't lie to me, Marianne. I've heard things. People are talking. You need to be careful." "I know," I admitted, feeling trapped. "But it's complicated." "Complicated?" Her voice rose, her panic evident. "You're crossing lines that shouldn't be crossed, Marianne. If the administration finds out, you could be expelled." "I'm aware of the risk, Joanna," I snapped, frustration spilling over. "It's not just about grades anymore. I care about him." She looked at me with a mixture of hurt and disbelief. "Do you really think he cares about you? Or is this just a game to him?" Her words sliced through me, sharp and painful. "Enough," Connell interrupted, stepping in protectively. "This is between Marianne and me. You don't understand our relationship." Joanna's expression shifted, her concern hardening. "Relationship? This isn't a relationship, Connell. This is manipulation." She turned and stormed out, leaving a charged silence in her wake. I turned to Connell, my voice trembling with anger and desperation. "What are we doing?" My voice trembled, barely hiding the storm inside me. "We're fighting for what we have," he replied, his tone resolute. But as I looked into his eyes, I felt a gnawing dread that this was just the beginning, and soon our secrets would be exposed to the world. The complaint against us loomed like a ticking bomb, and I knew we had to act before it all detonated, shattering the fragile connection we'd built. The air in the hearing room was thick with tension as I took my seat across from the committee, their eyes narrowing with unspoken questions. Across from me, Professor Connell sat still, his face unreadable, but I could feel my own dread rising, knotting in my chest. "Miss Collins," the head of the committee began, her voice sharp and formal. "Please explain the nature of your relationship with Professor Connell." My heart raced. I almost felt Connell's gaze, but I couldn't bring myself to look back. He was helping me academically," I said, my voice nearly breaking. "I was struggling and he offered to help. It was all academic at first." Connell gave a tiny nod, as if trying to reassure me, but the silence in the room felt louder than ever. Then Joanna entered suddenly, her face pale, her steps firm. "Marianne, just be honest," she said, her voice carrying a mix of urgency and warning. "They deserve to know the whole truth." I froze, the words choking in my throat. "Joanna," I whispered, panic slipping into my voice. "Not here." The committee looked between us, suspicion brewing in their eyes. "Would you care to clarify, Miss Collins?" Another member pressed. There was nowhere left to hide. I felt trapped. With Joanna watching, I realized I couldn't keep up the facade. I started developing feelings for him, I admitted, the words barely above a whisper. And he didn't stop me. I thought it was something real. The silence that followed was suffocating. "What did you hope to achieve from this, Marianne?" asked the committee head, her tone calm but relentless. "I don't know," I said, the words tumbling out. "I thought he cared. I thought it mattered." Connell finally spoke, his voice steady but detached. "I misjudged my role as her mentor. I didn't maintain the boundaries I should have." His eyes met mine, an apology there, but it felt hollow. "For that, I am truly sorry." The committee members exchanged glances, expressions tight. Then one of them finally spoke. "We'll need to deliberate further. Miss Collins, Professor Connell, thank you for your statements." I left the room in a daze, Joanna close behind. She grabbed my arm as soon as we stepped out, her expression filled with worry. "Marianne," she said softly, "I tried to warn you. This was never going to end well." I pulled my arm free, feeling the weight of everything sinking in. "I know," I whispered, my voice breaking. I thought I could handle it." She looked at me with a mixture of sadness and disappointment. "You're better than this, Marianne. Don't forget it." As I walked away, I could feel the emptiness settle in, a gnawing sense of loss. Had any of it been real? Or had I been chasing nothing but an illusion, tangled up in something I could never truly control?